Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to go over the last part of the CCC and how that parlays with the Kabbalistic perspective. But before I do that, I'd like to go over some of the products that I have on my store. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and you can help support my work because most of the videos that I do are for free. I have thousands of videos for free. You can donate on my homepage through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. Just click the link here and donate, and that helps support my work. I greatly appreciate it. You can also purchase some of the products that I have. I have ebooks on the store about artificial intelligence, a little bit about science, with medicine, genomics, also finance. And I have health products on my store so you can follow my protocol and improve your health. I have toothpaste, I have structural nanosilver liquids and gels, soaps, structural nanosilver soaps. I also have lozenges and drops, especially for the cold season. I have a a veggie cap probiotic and multivitamins. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver products. In addition, I have a very strong antioxidant called C60. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It's a very strong antioxidant to soak up free radicals. I also have a plethora of different supplements. I have vitamin D3, vitamin C, omega-3, ashwagandha root, goodnight formula, a probiotic that is in a powdered form, resveratrol, vitamin B complex, turmeric, magnesium and zinc, lignans, very important for your immune system, collagen, digestive enzymes. I have Clarity Factor, but it's not in stock at this moment. It should be back in stock early November. Olive leaf extract, very important for your cardiovascular and immune system. Zeolite to help detoxify heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, especially forever chemicals. Myotrol to help build muscle and maintain muscle mass. I have 5 brand new products on my store. NAC, which is really important to help bring up your glutathione levels. It's a very strong antioxidant. Ubiquinol, also an antioxidant, but it increases your energy levels and is a neuroprotector. NAD plus helps to repair your DNA and increase your energy levels and help to protect your neurons. Vitamin K2, very important for cardiovascular health, but also bone health, and nattokinase for cardiovascular health. I also have 2 different types of deodorants in stock. I have citrus and peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. These are made from essential oils from the Himalayas. It's a dual purpose product. You use it as a deodorant, but you can also use it to help detoxify. So please go to my store and get, a couple bars for your household. This deodorant is very high quality. Again, it's made from essential oils. It's for males and females. Anti-aging boxes, I have a lot of them. I'm starting a new type of box called the longevity boxes, but the anti-aging boxes have a different combination of supplements that help you slow down the aging process, improve your immune system, reduce free radicals, neutralize pathogens, bring down inflammation. So take a look at that. I also have a skincare product line to help improve your skin health. And in the longevity boxes, you can get the NAC, the NAD plus, the nattokinase, the vitamin K2, and the ubiquinol, which is CoQ10, at a discount. You can if you buy it in a set in a bundle. So get one of the longevity boxes, the beginner's box, to reduce the cost if you want to get all the products that I have here. Ubiquinol is really important. It's the active form for CoQ10. This is the most bioavailable CoQ10 that you can get. So this is a very high quality product. So please take. I've been taking ubiquinol for a long time. Um, so those are the products that I have. And lastly, I have two class modules, and one's in pulmonology, the other is in immunology. And what you do is you purchase it for $50. You get a lot of information, you get videos and lectures on pulmonology. You'll get a unique password. You log in, you'll be able to download your PDFs and take a look at the videos that I created. Once you get your password, you just go into classes and just, go into which module you purchased, pulmonology module, let's say, and you type in your unique password. Now, and the same thing with immunology. You learn a lot. You learn a lot. So, with that said, let's go to the rest of the lecture on the CCC and Kabbalah. Okay. Now, we stopped here. All right. And again, please go to my different channels to make sure that you see telemetry episode 14. So telemetry episode 14 goes over the first half of this PowerPoint. I stopped at this slide. This lecture is going to finish up this concept of CCC and how it parlays with Kabbalah. All right. Conformal cyclic cosmology, CCC, is from Penrose. All right. I mentioned this on episode 14, and I modified it to kind of give it a Kabbalistic perspective. All right. And Penrose basically thinks that eons go on forever. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, make sure you see episode 14. I don't have time to reiterate the things I said in there. I talked for almost 3 hours on the subject. So go to episode 14 before you watch this video. Because from the concepts that are in that video, you'll build, you'll take those concepts and we'll build on it in this episode. So basically there are eons, and Penrose thought that eons went on forever and in infinity, in the positive direction in time and in the negative in the past. All right. Now, from a Kabbalistic perspective, the teachings, the understanding is that we're in the last world, Asiya. And not only are we in the last world, we're in the last attribute of Asiya, which is Malchut. All right. So if we use the model from Penrose and modify it to a Kabbalistic modeling system, then we're at Asiya Malchut. If that's the case, then we're in the last eon. But we don't know for sure because we need to find out if we can reach the Hawking point in this world. Now, the slides that I go further in this PowerPoint, we didn't go over in episode 14. All right, people that don't understand what the Big Bang is, the picture that I have on the right is a model of the Big Bang. And the whole idea is that there was a singularity with lots of energy that expanded out. And what happened is that there was an expansion, and then there was there was an inflationary period. Okay, a gigantic inflationary period that led to a further expansion. So we have an expansion, an inflationary period, and then an expansion. Okay. Now, there were there are different, as the universe expands and cools, then the formation of matter can happen. Okay, this is all Big Bang theory, right? So in this region here, you have high energy cosmic rays. In this energy, you have protons, all right? And they're saying possible dark matter relics. In this area, you have nucleuses forming. In this area, you have nucleons. I'm sorry, nucleons form, and then the nuclei form. All right, and each one of these eras it has a certain type of energy density. Okay, and the amount of time that it took. Okay, so time and energy. So you can see that it's taking more and more time, and energy is going down. Okay, and then the next epoch, we have cosmic microwave background radiation is visible. Okay. This is that CMB map that we can see. So that CMB map that I showed in episode 14 here, this map and the crossover of the Hawking points is this area here. Okay. Now, structure formation starts to happen in the next epoch, and then where we're at right now, today. And this is where there's dark energy accelerated and there's this expansion. Now this dark energy and dark matter concept, um, is debatable. It's kind of new cosmology, but the whole point with the Big Bang theory is that there's a bang, there's an expansion, there's some sort of inflation that takes place in the early days of the universe, and then this further expansion. The difference between the Big Bang and Penrose's theory is one, it's not just one point, it's multiple points called eons. All right. And each one expands and then contracts and then expands and contracts. So there's multiple, quote, Big Bangs. In addition, with Penrose's theory, the Big Bang is not smooth, it is rough. All right, because you're crunching down space at the end of an eon. And when you crunch down space, it's not smooth. With the Big Bang theory, the idea is that there's one Big Bang and it may just end up just cool, the universe cools down and dies out. Another theory is that the universe cools down and then collapses on itself. And then another Big Bang happens. But the idea is the Big Bang smooth. It's a key feature. Okay. And that it has this inflationary point. But Penrose is saying Big Bangs are not smooth and there was no inflationary stage here. Okay. Now, that's a little overview of the Big Bang and a little bit of the difference between Penrose and the Big Bang. There's more to it, but I go over that in episode 14. All right. Each eon has the key here is that we have eons and we have these Big Bangs. And what happens is that each eon, through Penrose's concept, each eon will create a mass of black holes that creates a Hawking point. When the universe starts to cool down, there's Hawking radiation, and eventually that Hawking point will cross over to a new aeon, and a new, quote, universe is born. All right. The key here is that as the aeon expands exponentially, it smooths out to a point where the relationship of particles don't know each other. because the space is so large. It's like almost infinitely large. Okay, it's so large that they don't know each other, and this Hawking point takes place, and a new universe is, but it's the same space. That's the key feature here. All right, it's the same space. All right, with this Kabbalistic perspective. The reason why I'm going to explain in another slide, but the the XYZ coordinate, or maybe even the XYZ time, so space time, it's the same. It's embedded. Each eon is embedded in another eon, kind of like Russian dolls. Okay, so you have this concept called Ein Sof, the infinite one, or the infinite. And the infinite, all right, creates a light that's called Or Ein Sof, the light of the infinite. The light of the infinite is not the infinite. It's the light from the infinite. And that light, all right, or energy is infinite. So if the energy is only a subset of the infinite one, and the energy is infinite, it only tells you more on how beyond infinite the the infinite one is beyond infinity. Now I know that kind of sounds strange, because how could you be beyond infinity? But you can't. The infinite one cannot be bound by constraints, and a constraint is infinity. It just goes on forever, but it's a constraint. All right. So the infinite one, Ein Sof, uh, creates a light, or creates an energy, or a vibration, however you want to call it, because remember, we can have E equals Planck's constant and frequency. All right. So a light or energy is a frequency. So a frequency or a light or an energy, however you want to define it, is infinitely bound, and it contracts. And when it contracts and creates an XYZ coordinate system. Now, if we want to use it in terms of Einstein understanding, then we're talking about space-time. Okay? So this process in Kabbalah is called the Diluge. And the Diluge is the giant leap of taking the Or Ein Sof and constricting it to create space, or space-time. That space-time that's created is called the Halal. All right. All worlds / eons use the same space. So all the worlds are using this space. Okay. That's created from the Diluge. But there each one of these attributes of the Sephiros, these are Sephiros for each world. There's 4 worlds in Kabbalah: Atzilus, Bria, Yitzhak, and Asiya. And each world has 10 attributes. And there's a flow of energy that goes down this way. And that flow is called Kav flow. All right. So when Or Ein Sof constricts the infinite light, or energy, or vibration, when that's constricted, a space is created. Okay. Or a space-time is created for all of these attributes, all these different sephira, right? All these different circles. And each circle is embedded in another, is sort of embedded in another circle. And I showed that in episode 14. This is, each one of these is a sephira. Okay. Each circle, embedded circle, is a sphere. It's actually a sphere, a 3-dimensional sphere, just represented on a 2D plane, and each sphere is embedded. Okay. So this this right here, this right here is embedded in here, which is embedded, all right? But they're all using the same space. So just imagine one gigantic space created because of the constriction of the Or Ein Sof through the Diluc. Space or space times created, and there's an embeddedness. Okay. So then all of a sudden there is a Kav flow. The first Kav flow flows into Atzilus Keter. That means that there's this constricted Or Ein Sof. This ends up beaming a little bit of itself, a little bit of a subset of the Or Ein Sof through the Kav flow into Atzilus Keter. All right. That's the first Big Bang, Atzilus Keter. And that's smooth. Okay. It's not condensed energy like through a black hole. It's beaming from the constriction of the Or Ein Sof. Okay. And that beam of light or radiation of light is what we call the Kav flow. And that Kav flow is going into each one of these attributes, each one of these sephirah. And once the sephirah, each one of the sephirahs are filled, then the whole Sephiroth is activated and that world is constituted. The Atzilus is constituted. We are in the Asiya world. And technically, we're in Asiya Malchut. We reside here. The universe, in the beginning, there was heaven and earth. That's the first phrase. Heaven was created here. This is heaven. All right. Atzilus Bria Yitzhara. And the Kav flow going into each one of these worlds. Earth is the material, and that's the Asiya world. So in the beginning, heaven and earth, these worlds were created. The heaven part and then the worldly part. Okay. There's another interpretation where there's the upper and the lower world, because there's a lower Atzilus and a higher Atzilus. There's kind of a mirror image, but I'm not going to get into that. All right. So with the Kav flow, it will flow in from top to bottom. All right. And actualize these worlds. So again, Ein Sof, the infinite, beyond infinite. It's really beyond infinite. Can't be bound. It's beyond infinite, beyond comprehension. Then the infinite light, right? The light of the infinite. And then that's constricted to create space or space-time. And then there's a beam coming out of the constricted light called the Kav flow that will fill up this space, or what is called Chalal. That space is filled up and it starts at a point, and that's the first Big Bang. Smooth space. Right? And remember what I said here. The first Big Bang, based on the Big Bang theory, it's smooth. Based on Penrose, each eon is not smooth because he's saying it's infinite from the past, infinite into the future. But with Kabbalah, it states that there was a beginning, and that was from the Atzilus Keter. So this has to be smooth because there was no Big Bang. Or let me rephrase. There's no Big Bang from a condensing of a black hole, right? There's no black hole that's in existence yet in Atzilus Keter. Black holes start in Asiya Keter. Right? You'll see why, because this is the material world. I'll go into that. All right. So what if we zoomed in on the energy flowing into Atzilus Keter and Chokhmah? That's Atzilus Chokhmah. That that energy flow, all right, which would be the space that's created, and then the energy, the Ka flow flowing into Atzilus GETTR, and then expanding, and then creating another world or another attribute. Now remember, all these attributes are in the same space, but there is some sort of boundary or screen that's like this. So crossing over from one eon to another, or one attribute to another, or one sephira to another is not easy. Okay. All right, so this is zooming in on this area here. All right, at the very beginning, or Ein Sof constricts the light, or the Ein Sof constricts the light, that or Ein Sof, and that constriction creates space, but it's not actualized yet. So the Ka flow comes in, and there are 40 attributes here. There's 40 attributes, 10 for each of the worlds. There's 4 worlds, so 40 attributes. So E40 is how I designate what the energy density is coming from the first Ka flow into Atzilus GETTR. All right. So E40, now E is really energy, which is Planck's constant times the frequency. So this is an energy divided by some space unit. All right. Some unit of space. So this is really energy density. This represents energy density. Okay. Now, this E40 is the energy density that's coming from the first Big Bang, that's smooth, that's the Ka flow flowing into Atzilus GETTR, flowing into here. Okay. Now, when that flows in, that Ka flow flows in, it's expanding. All right. That space is expanding. Kind of very similar to this, but without inflation. It's just expanding. So using Penrose's concept, just there's no real inflation. That's inflation. It's expanding, then inflates, and then expands. There's no step. There's no inflationary step. It's just expands. Okay. So now there is this flow, energy density flow, going into the Atzilus GETTR, and there is a slight, because there's a fluctuation, the energy density fluctuation as it's coming in. There's a slight fluctuation. So there is a little bit of a density of energy density at the 40 level, and then there's a slightly less, what I call light and heavy. Okay. As this is expanding very rapidly, because it's high density energy, the question is, does it really know time? Because it's rapid. So it may not know time. So it's very possible that the first 3 universes, which is quote heaven, all right, but these 3 universes could have been created very fast or instantaneously. All right. But if you slowed, because from our perspective, we have time. If you slowed that almost instantaneous thing, it had steps. Okay. And those steps are this. You have this slight energy density difference in the space that's expanding rapidly, to the point where, as it's expanding, the energy density per unit of space gets less and less rapidly. Now, of course, the energy densities that are light, the E39.9, will reach E1 energy density before E40. All right. What will happen is that there will be a 39 areas that will be at E1 that are near each other. That those energy densities will be able to cross over into Atzilus Chokmah, or the next eon. And so that energy, that E39s, all these E1s add up, there's 39 of them, they cross over because they're the ones that hit first. The ones that are heavy, they're not allowed to cross over. The reason being is this is expanding so quickly that the step is, are you at E1? Yes. If yes, can you cross over? If yes, you can cross over. But the problem comes in when you have when you when you have something that crosses over. There is kind of like, it's like a shutter. It's like a shutter here, and that shutter is prevents the E40 from coming through. So let me rephrase that. E1, hold on. All right. E1 is reached by E39.9 first, then the E40s. So the light densities hit the E1 first. Why? Because as this is expanding, and it's expanding rapidly, it's stretching out, and the energy density is becoming less and less. So the light areas will hit first, E1. The eon shutter, or the eon critical point for crossover, to cross over from one eon to another, is E1, energy density. Okay. But the thing is that each eon can only absorb a little bit less than the previous eon. Okay. So the first eon was able to absorb E40. The second eon, or Atzilus Chokmah, can only absorb E39, and the same thing going down the subsequently, each eon can only absorb a certain amount. So the first 39 E1s will be able to cross over, and the eon can't absorb any more. And so there's a as these E1s are coming into the new eon, and it's almost instantaneous, because these things this is rapidly expanding, and they come over quickly. All right. It's almost instantaneous. But once it crosses over, it can't hold any more light. So there's two things that are happening. There's a once once these E1s cross over as a collective of E39 energy density into the new eon, there's a forward force. There's an expansionary force. All right, for that eon. We just talked about, there's like this, there's expansion here. There's expansion. Same thing here. There's an expansion. Well, the same thing here. There's an expansion, and there's a forward force of expansion. Well, there's also kind of like a downdraft, or there's a backward force that pushes back to prevent any other E1s from crossing over, because there's 39 E1s that have crossed over. There was one 40 that was, there was one E1 that was a heavy density area that could not cross over because of this backward force after the first E39s crossed over, but also this edge of its eon, this edge of its space is stretching so much, so fast, that the moment that it becomes an E1, it no longer is an E1 to be able to make the crossover. So it's a combination of the forward force for expansion for the next eon, the backward force from that actual crossover, the three for the 39 energy densities of E1, and this very fast expansion of the edge of the space for this eon. Now you got to remember that this eon is really a circle. It's really a, even though this is represented as a cone expanding, it's really a sphere expanding. So it's like a three-dimensional sphere that's expanding, but it's just represented as a triangle or a cone, right? But this edge is a gigantic sphere, and it's expanding very rapidly. So that last E1 that didn't cross over, it will get to E1, that energy density will get to E1, but it's latent and it can't get over because the next eon can't take the energy. It's already closed off. It's already created its own kind of like Russian doll, if you want to use that term. So there's two things going on: this fast expansion preventing that last E1 from crossing over, and this backward force that's preventing any new energies from flowing in. All right. In Kabbalah, this backward force and this prevention of the last E1 from crossing over is the tikkun process. All right. The idea that you can have breaking of vessels or pieces, and that they can be brought back into the eon. So the whole idea here is that it was an E1, just instant, that latent heavy density area turned into an E1 just slightly before these 39 E1s. Couldn't cross over because the backward force and because that backward force and the spreading was so fast that E1 ended up now being an E.9 or an E.8 and can't cross over, because to cross over it has to be an E1, assuming that the previous eon has energy space for it. Okay, so that's a key point. So let me reiterate this concept is really important to understand. You have energy densities, so you have energy you have energy per space unit, okay, or unit of space. When an energy goes in, or a big bang goes in, smooth or rough, in this case it's smooth, there's a slight variation in the density because there's a quantum flux. This slight energy density, the light densities will get to E1 first before the heavy densities. So 39 can cross over because that's the max energy density for the next eon, which is absolute Chochmah. Once that E39 crosses over, these 39s don't cross over all at the same time, but it's almost the same time. It's a very minute difference, but it's almost the same time. It creates a backward force to prevent that last E1 from crossing over. And that last E1 then ends up being lighter density as the expansion of the space continues to expand rapidly. That E1, that last E1 ends up being an E.8 and can't cross over. So this backward force and the energy starting to become less dense. This is part of the tikkun process within the Sephirah. Okay. Now, this is you got to remember that each one of these eons are each one of these separa. And it takes 10 eons to create a world. These three worlds are heaven. This world here is the physical world or earth, but this is the material world. Okay, so you have E40 energy going into a eon, E39, blah blah blah, and then it all the way goes to E10, right? And then it'll all the way go to our world. We're over here, which is this right here, Malchut Asiya. So I'm representing just through dot 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 that we're going through the process of filling each one of the eons. Okay. And that each one of these here are one of these, and each one of these are Penrose's eon. Now, the energy flows into E40, turns into E39, E38, E37, same process. It's the same process. This process just keeps on repeating itself up to it gets to E10. Now, E10, you're now at the beginning of Asiya, which is GETTR Asiya. So we just went through Atzilus, GETTR, and then we flowed through Atzilus, through Bria, through Yitzhara. Now we're at Asiya GETTR. That's E10. Asiya, all right? So we had E11. We had E11 flowing in before E10. E10. Now we have E10 flowing in. Now, from E40 through E11, eons don't have mass. They're without mass. There's no black holes. It's just an energy density that is just getting less and less as it goes into these universes. Doesn't have time to form matter. This is such a fast process, doesn't have time to form matter. Okay, now matter is starting to be created in the E10s. And the E10 to E1. So these are eons that have mass and they have black holes. So at the end of each eon, there will be a supermassive black hole that allows for what is called that Hawking point. And that supermassive black hole is formed by collecting matter that eventually, as the space starts to expand, starts to radiate out the Hawking radiation to the Hawking point, and that Hawking point will eventually cross over to the next eon. Okay, so you have no black holes here, and no mass from E40 to E11, but you have black holes and mass from E10 to E1. So here, what happens is that the ratio of matter to energy, it increases from subsequent eons. So you have more energy here and less mass, but you have more let me rephrase that. The mass to energy ratio is less for E10 eon than the E1 eon. E1 eon has more mass to energy ratio. Okay. So that's a key concept here. This last eon is the Asiya Malchut. This E10 is Asiya GETTR. Asiya GETTR, E10, Asiya Malchut, E1. Now, so it's the same process, all right? Instead of it being E40, you have E10, and E10 ends up being E10 and E9.9, and the 9.9 will hit to the E1 first, and it will cross over. But because these worlds here, E10 to E1, are slower in expansion relative to the previous eons, that it has time to create matter. And that because it's having time to create matter, what's happening is that you have black holes that are forming and creating the Hawking points. And um, these Hawking points will end up crossing over. All right. Now, fast forward, going from E10 to E all the way to E2. Now, something interesting happens in between Yesod, this is Yesod, Asiya Yesod, and Asiya Malchut. What happens is that you have E2 coming in, so you have energy density of E2 and 1.9. So E1.9, E.1.9, this is expanding slower than E10. More matter is allowed to accumulate and larger super massive black holes are allowed to form. And an energy density, not energy density, a density point at the Hawking point is allowed to cross over. Okay. But what crosses over is an E1. This eon can only accept E1. It can't accept E10 or it can't. All right. So E2 has an energy density of E2 and E1.9 because it's just a little bit of a flux, that quantum flux. And that quantum flux, all right, has will read that this expansion is slower, so it's not as fast as E40, and it allows time for more of the development of the universe. All right. You need time for the development to coalesce and to cool down. If it's fast, high energy, fast, universe can't form. But with E10, these expansions are slower, so material can be built up, but may not form the way our universe, observable universe is. It may be only at the nuclei level before it goes into the next eon. All right. Because the energy levels are high before it goes into the next eon. So, but there's matter, but it doesn't form. Like, for example, to give you a good example here. In the E10 eon, which is Asiya GETTR, you have matter, but you may not have galaxies because you may only have nuclei because the energy density is so there's so much energy in this eon, and the time expansion isn't slow enough to allow for other matter to accumulate. It reaches the E1 rapidly, and what happens is that it crosses over. Now, but there's still matter, and there's still accumulation of Hawking points. It's just that the accumulation of Hawking points aren't from stars going into massive black holes. It's the rapid culmination of these nuclei forming the Hawking points. There's just not enough time for the universe to expand and go into the material world that we know. But it's still matter. There's still matter in E10. Now in E9, it's just a little bit more, it's slower. It's a little bit more time for it to accumulate. So therefore, maybe in E9, you may start seeing not just nuclei form, you may actually have some sort of cosmic background radiation. You may actually have visible spectrum All right. In E8, you may actually have some cluster formation taking place, some sort of maybe star formation, but maybe not a full galaxy formation. All right, that's the point I'm making. You have matter, but it's not fully matured because the time expansion is not as slow. Or not the expansion of space is the expansion of space is very rapid in E40. And as you get to E1, the expansion is the way our universe expands in a very slow, it expands fast, but in relative terms, it's a slow expansion compared to the E40. That's the point I'm making. So E10, there's matter, but there's a lot of energy. So the ratio, that ratio, there's more energy to matter, and therefore that ratio is low. But as matter increases and energy decreases, the energy density decreases, then what happens is that the more and more matter can accumulate. That's the point. As more and more matter accumulates, more and more of the super black holes form, and you're more involving the Hawking point from a super black hole than the actual just the natural um, uh, the natural fast density reduction from this fluctuation, this density fluctuation. If there's very, very fast expansion in relative terms to compare to our universe, 39.9 energy density gets to E1 quickly. In our universe, it takes much more time for that energy density to get to E1. That's the point I'm making. So this matter will accumulate and create these black holes. And these black holes will create these Hawking points and then do a crossover. And this eon can only accept, let's say, E9. So only enough E9 energy density can cross over. Then you get that backward force. So E9 backward force on the E10 eon, and the other E1s that we're starting to accumulate can't get over because there's this expansion, space expansion, plus the backward force that prevents it from crossing over. All right, so that keeps on going up to the point where we're going to be focused on just the E2 and E1 to close it out. All right, as the E2 comes in, as E2 crosses from E3 crosses into E2, right? E3 eon deposits let E2 energy into the E2 eon. You'll have this density difference, E2 and E1.9. And this is a slower expansion compared to E40, but it's still fast in relative terms, but compared to E40, it's slower. So more of the universe can form and create structure and more matter. And therefore, these super black holes are going to be more involved to create the Hawking point. And what happens is that those Hawking points only allow enough energy to flow in that is E1. And E1 will get deposited into Asiya Malchut, and that will create a new expansion. The thing is that the universe is expanding and not and you have E1 and let's say E.9. Well, E.9 will never get to E1 as the universe is expanding. But there's a small amount of E1 that energy density in the early stage of this universe. But it's expanding rapidly, and it what happens is that the energy densities become less than E1. And therefore, the the Hawking point never is reached in our universe. The point I'm making here is that even with supermassive black holes, we're not going to be able to create another energy level that's E1 because if you look at the pattern, there's always energy that's left over in the previous eon. There's always an E1 energy level that's left over through the Tikkun process. E40 can only deposit E39 into the next eon. So the E39 eon left over in the previous eon E1, right? One energy density. Well, you you can't you, you can't have a new eon past Asiya Malchut because the whole idea of Kabbalah is that it started from Absolute GETTR, maybe even one world above this, but I don't understand the Kabbalah above Atzilus, but let's just say that it starts at Atzilus GETTR. All right. This here, because I think what's above Atzilus GETTR is really this right here. I think it's the Ein Sof and the Or Ein Sof mechanism that's going into Atzilus GETTR. And we only care about this part here going down. So, but the point here is this Atzilus GETTR is the beginning of the eons. The last eon in Kabbalah would be Asiya Malchut, because Asiya is the material world. There's nothing beyond the material world. There's nothing going lower than us. We are the lowest. We are the most constrained. We are the most we are the process of this symptom, this constriction of the Kav flow that creates our world. All right. We could not exist in Atzilus GETTR. Why? Well, the physics behind it is that the energy densities are too damn high for material to form. Same thing in E10. Matter does form, but doesn't have enough time to coalesce into solar systems, right? Now, each eon, it's getting closer and closer to a world that we understand. But E10 through E1 has matter in it, just too high of energy density. Well, in our world, Asiya Malchut, the energy densities are low enough in the time expansion that the expansion of the universe is slow enough that allows us to form. That's the point I'm making. Now, it seems to me that you will have the energy densities will be slightly too small to be able to create a Hawking point to meet the threat. A Hawking point will be created, but that Hawking point is going to have less than E1 to be able to do the next crossover. I don't think that that we are in the last eon. If CCC, conformal cyclic cosmology, can be modified into a Kabbalistic perspective, we are in the last eon because we are in Asiya Malchut, and we are at that that last energy point that allows for the universe to coalesce, for our reality to be materialized or actualized. And that with these supermassive black holes, that form, it'll get close to the E1, but not at the E1. Because there's not going to be just one massive black hole. There's going to be a few massive black holes. And those, because there's a few massive black holes, supermassive black holes, each one of them will not have the E1 density because the E1 density was at the very beginning of the universe. You would have to have a supermassive black hole that is just one. Well, this space here is so stretched out that the supermassive black holes never talk to it, and they never touch each other. So you might have a supermassive black hole with E.5, right here, and you might have a supermassive black hole here at E.5. They never reach each other, and therefore, when the Hawking radiation happens, and you have a Hawking point here and here, they're both 0.5, E.5. Well, that's not enough for a crossover. They never touch. Another perspective is that you have a supermassive black hole, but there has to be a Hawking radiation that takes place. And through that Hawking radiation, material is being radiated back in, energy, because it's radiation, energy is being radiated back into the space of this eon. And the Hawking point is going to be less than the E1 because of the radiation that's there. So those are two reasons why I think that we're in Asiya Malchut, taking it from a perspective of cosmology with the Hawking point. Point one, you have more than just one supermassive black holes that don't touch each other because the space is so large, and you never reach a Hawking point of E1. Or even if you had one supermassive black hole that has all the energy of it, it still has to radiate out its Hawking radiation before it condenses to the Hawking point. Well, if it's radiating out, if the supermassive black hole has E1, but it has to radiate some of its energy out into the cold space of this expansion, there's going to be less than E1 at the Hawking point, and therefore can't do the threshold. So those are the mappings of CCC to a Kabbalistic perspective based on these four different worlds. Now, the key point here is that even though you have a space that's expanded, and it's something that's a sphere that is expanded so large that it seems like it's a flat plane for each one of these eons still exist that have a little bit of energy. Okay. Now think about it. 40 energy deposited 39. So it had E1. 39 deposited 38. So in the end, it had an E1. So to stabilize each eon is at a steady state energy, total energy within its eon of E1. Each one of these, like for example, this deposits E39 energy density. The amount of energy is E39. It leaves an energy density of E1. And that happens for all of them. The steady state of an eon is E1. So because there is an energy that actualizes, it stays in this eon, E1 stays in this eon, E1 stays in this eon. That's true for all 40 of them. Okay. Now they are stabilized. Each one of these have been actualized and stabilized. Now you can communicate back and forth. So, so, so you have a flow, you have a conduit that has been created, a flow forward and back. And this is another part of the tikkun process. Like, remember, I said that there's a tikkun process here, right? Part of the tikkun process is that some of the sephira will flow into another, and then and there are shards that can come back into the previous eon that are pure shards. They call them pure shards. These shards, that's the E1 that's left over from the heavy density. Those pure shards of the vessel, the broken vessel, because when this happens, it's like a broken vessel. So, but the pure shard is that E1 that's left over. That's part of the internal tikkun process. All right. That the leftover E1 energy and also this backward force. But there's also a more humanistic tikkun, right? This is eon formation tikkun process. Then there's a human tikkun process where in this world we do things that are good and bad. If we do things that are good, then we're elevating this world, the energy in this world. We're elevating spiritually out of the material world. We're elevating by doing good things. We're elevating the material world into the spiritual world. Remember, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzhara, that's heaven. Okay. The material world is Asiya. So that means that we do good things. It's elevating through the different eons, E1 through E10, through the conduit that's created, right? And then into the spiritual world, all the way up to E40, which is Atzilus Keter. Depending on how good or how much intent we have with the good that we do, is how much it elevates up. Oh, if we do something really benign and it doesn't take much effort, it may only elevate up a little bit. But if we do something that's really difficult but really meaningful, then it elevates all the way up to the top. All right. And this is what is called karvana. The karvana of what you do that that's good, right, will allow for you to elevate the material into the spiritual. The same thing, if you elevate something good into the material world, or if you elevate something in the material, something good in the material world up into the spiritual world, then something positive will come down through this flow, through this flow, this conduit that's created. So you do something good, it flows up. If you have the highest level kavana and the most the purest form of this goodness, it will flow all the way to E40. And then something good will come back. It'll reverberate. So there's an energy force of good going up. If it's a strong energy force of good or kavana, it'll come up to E40. And then an energy force will come back down, quote, blessing. Do something good, blessing will come down to the material through this conduit that's created. All right. Same thing though. You do something bad in the material world, you do something bad, that the bad will come up And depending on how bad it is, if it's bad but not that bad, maybe it stays up to here. If it's really bad, then it'll go all the way up to here. And then a curse will come down. Something bad will flow back down. All right. But this stabilizing of the eons with the E1 creates the conduit for this energy flow of up and down. This Cobb flow reverses once this thing's all actualized. So that's basic, and that's what I mean by E40 to E1 eons can communicate with each other. So if the Kabbalistic perspective can be mapped to CCC, that means that there is the ability to communicate between one eon to a previous eon, and that Penrose is wrong. The universe did start as a Big Bang at Atzilus GETTR, and subsequent energy flows were most likely. Let me go. There's one point here that I forgot to mention. Big Bang smooth. That smoothness most likely was from E40 all the way to E11 because there's no matter. So that means Atzilus, Bria, and Yetzirah worlds, they were smooth transitions, smooth space, as they crossed over. Once you got to E10, because there is material, once you get to the 10th, the E10 eon, which is Asiya GETTR, that energy flows in smooth. But from GETTR to Chokhmah in Asiya world, that is using black holes. And when you're crunching down space, and by crunching down space, it's not smooth. That helps to build up this material world that ends up being our world here. Remember, each one of these is a little bit more mass than the previous. No mass here. Only energy. Only spiritual. Okay? So that's another key point that I forgot to mention here. So you have black hole, or I'm sorry, Big Bang from the first Cobb flow, smooth. All these are smooth, transition smooth, and then all of a sudden there's a smooth from Yetzirah Malchut to Asiya GETTR, but then from Asiya GETTR to Chokhmah in Asiya, that is rough because there is accumulation of black holes for this E1 energy source. But the roughness is less up here. The roughness of the black holes become more prevalent lower down the Sephiroth. Okay? Because you have this ratio of mass to energy density that's increasing. Because the black holes are more of a player within this range. There's more players in the black holes here than here. So that's my take on trying to map the CCC to Kabbalah. So conformal, cyclic, cosmology, and Kabbalah. So thank you for listening to this. I know this is a very difficult topic to understand, but this is my take on taking Penrose's theory and mapping into something that has been known for thousands of years based on Kabbalistic tradition. Thank you for listening. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get those products that I have mentioned earlier. Help slow down the aging process, increase your immune system, build up energy, have more vitality by taking the supplements that I offer and the stacking that I recommend. In addition, please help support my work by subscribing to all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also follow me on X. I have 2 feeds on X. I have TikTok, and I also have GETTR. So please follow me on those social media platforms. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.